most common solution these days in platform engineering is to give out code as an interface. Terraform modules, Helm charts. And if you want to change your implementation, you're asking the users of that platform to change their what they have to learn. Now you're asking your users to change what they've had to learn, how they interface with that thing. That's not an API.
Welcome to another edition of Cloud Unfiltered. I'm your host, Michael Chenitz, and today I have Abby. How you doing, Abby?
Good. How you doing?
Good. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing right now?
Yeah, cool. So I am a principal engineer at a startup called Syntasso, based in London. Despite this accent, not going anywhere anytime soon, I don't think. We are in the platform engineering space, helping people build the platforms they need using a toolbox called Craddocks, and sort of found my way there after working in those internal software development type teams for basically my entire career through different role titles like QA and SRE and platform engineer and all these things, but always looking at how to try and support my peers in the software development departments at organizations and be able to do things easier and faster and all of that. So yeah, and I love I think what's always been true, I'm not a comp sci background, so I'm very big on the kind of socio-technical balance of things. And so you'll see me bopping around the CNCF on the more technical side of things, and you'll also see me around the team topology space as an advocate there, because I'm very interested in how organizations work around their software. So
And those things really go hand in hand. It's funny because I'm somebody that's like, I am a shiny object person for myself, but I love to understand, you need to understand, first of all, how company politics work and how solutions work, and then back yourself into those tech stacks. And a lot of people don't do that very well. And I should say not just people, but companies don't do that very well. They'll hear, hey, I hear we need to be cloud first. Let's go cloud first. Why? What is your need? What is your solution need? Does it actually need to be cloud first? Does it need to be in Kubernetes? Does it need to be? And so I'm always, like you, interested in, why people have decided certain things and whether it's really the right answer all the time.
and sometimes you're talking so maturely and interestingly about how organizations think. I mean, sometimes it's driven development, right? When it comes to
Yeah.
individuals, I was genuinely very early in my career. I was waiting to be assigned to a project, and I witnessed somebody who was a very senior technologist get asked to take over a very small early stage project, and they asked the question like, "Well, what's the tech stack?" Which is a reasonable question to ask. It may or may not be in their wheelhouse. And the answer was, it'll be dated a little bit to when this was, Java and Maven. And the person was like, oh, I've just done like 3 years of that. Can we use Groovy and Gradle? And like the answer was like, if you think that's what's right. And the engineer was like, great, okay. And I wound up on that project, and we did Gradle and Groovy for that project. And it was a small not-for-profit organization. Like, they didn't know Gradle and Groovy and those things. And like, I hope that it all worked itself out, especially given how much Groovy you can basically just write Java and it compiles and all that. But you watch that happen all the time. Decisions get made for very silly or I won't say silly, but very narrow scoped reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I wouldn't say I don't do that, but the reason why it's okay for me is I work in emerging tech. So it's my job to understand what that emerging tech is, and I don't really have a real use case. But when I chat about it, I want to understand what that use case is. But going back to the tech, let me just throw something at you and you tell me whether I'm right or wrong.
Cool.
So you and I have been in this kind of cloud native space for a while. And in the beginning, when Kubernetes first came out, it was the cool new thing, and people were really moving towards it. And there was Docker and Kubernetes, and we came from VMs and all that kind of stuff. People don't need to go down the whole history, but I have this feeling that in the last year or so, and it was especially prevalent in the last KubeCon, is that people are getting frustrated about how many different ways there are to establishing this kind of pipeline for getting your stuff from code to solution. And what I've seen is that in that frustration, what a lot of people are seeing now are these kind of platforms and platform engineering, and that's the answer to this frustration that people were having of not doing things in a standard way over and over again. Do you kind of feel like that's what occurred?
I think it's interesting, right? Because it's always it depends. I'm a recovering consultant. I apologize to everyone when I do that, but I'll try to explain why I think it depends. No, so I do think it does though, because I think that the consistency you're talking about is the pendulum that we swing on. So maybe I don't know, 5 to 8 years ago ish, PaaS was all the rage. So
Hmm.
by PaaS, I mean platform as a service. I mean the tools like Cloud Foundry and Heroku, where the originals, Fly.io and Vercel are more popular today, but they're all these kinds of things where they have a really concrete way of doing things, and they are buttery smooth, great experiences, right? And they do what they do really well, and everybody wants them. And so, but the pendulum swing away from that is when those things don't quite meet your needs as an organization. So, my last implementation job that I was at, end user job I was at, I actually helped move one of our teams from Vercel to a Kubernetes deployment because it needed to be in a PCI compliant environment, and Vercel couldn't do that. Please, Vercel, if you still can't do that, please do that. Your tool is fantastic. We just couldn't use it. And like, that's the thing. So I think what you're saying is 100% true. The fact that people are frustrated that there isn't just a buttery smooth push, CF push, Heroku push kind of experience inside their organizations. I think what we are also seeing though is that organizations aren't feeling like they can use one of those tools for a large percentage of their work, right? So they can use it for narrow sections, and maybe they use more than one of them for different narrow sections. Vercel is fantastic for front end. Heroku is fantastic for Ruby. CF push is fantastic for 10 12 factor apps, whatever it is that you get. But all of a sudden then you're really split up, and so
Yep.
you're still not a really easy, consistent, portable experience across the org. And that's where the platform engineering comes in, I think, is this idea of creating the organization's simple push that under the covers can use any number of those third party tools or custom tools if required, but keep that to a minimum if you can. So
It's funny, you hit on a few things there, but one of the things I always come back to is everybody, bar none, everyone has always talked about how great the experience of Heroku is.
I know.
Why isn't it the most popular thing in the world?
So my theory on this is, and I said this it came to me when I was preparing a talk for last year, is that when you look at the team topologies interaction models, they say that X as a service is fantastic at scale because you get what you need on demand, self service, all these things. But you can't just make a service. You have to first collaborate and then enable people in larger and larger groups to use it to like verify the use case, verify the solution, and then you can make it an on demand self service situation. Heroku is basically moving straight to that as a service without ever collaborating with you and your team. And so there's like small aspects of it that don't fit. They may not fit your security requirements, they may not fit your cloud requirements, your scale requirement, whatever it is. And so all of a sudden it works beautifully if you can change to it. But it is built for scale. It's built for wide use, wide adoption. So it is not going to change to you. And that's where then we start to, move
It's so
along.
funny though, because everybody always uses that as the example, as
It
what it
is.
should be, of how smooth it is, how easy it is to do.
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting. And all these a lot of these platform solutions um kind of try and mimic that, but in
Hmm.
their own way.
Absolutely. 100%. I think everybody, as you say, everyone still does that. I think I was quoting a Kelsey Hightower tweet from, the like 2010 or something, 2012 or something. And then he just said, still, as a retweet,
Still.
like, I don't know, like 8 years later or something. And it was like,
Yep.
so, and
Yep.
it's so true. So, yeah.
So what do you think people need to get to? So there's this place they are now where they're using various solutions, and usually the bigger the orgs you get to different teams that are using different solutions to create their apps and solutions, and then they're trying to like tie this stuff together so there's more organization around it. how do you get from like being totally disassociative, I guess is the word, to being to all using a standard platform?
Yeah, so I guess the first question to that is the is it going to be a one standard platform, right? So at a certain scale, I think we need to stop talking about the platform and start
Yeah.
talking about like platform access, like that there are tools and there are things out there. I do think it's really important to have discoverability across an organization, even when you're going to have slight differences. So if you have mainframe engineers and you have, serverless engineers and WASM engineers and microservice engineers and whatever, um, they are going to have different needs, but the experience of I can take changes and move them through to production and I can see what I have access to on the platform should all sort of look the same in my opinion. And so that's the big thing, is starting to collect what do you have and what of those are you able to start treating with an abstraction above them, or start migrating to using similar things. But I think it's a bit of a fool's errand to try and migrate to the one right way of deploying inside of an organization of really any amount of scale. I mean, and when I say any amount, I mean even over 50 to 100 developers. You're going to have mobile apps, you're going to have which have a very different release cycle than web apps, and so on. And there has to be some like flexibility there for people to do the right thing for their environment. And that's the culture of DevOps. Like, build on top of the commonalities what your team needs, but let's keep the commonalities pushing as far up that stack as they possibly can.
Yeah, I think I asked someone else previously on this, but what happens when the tools that people use don't fit into the platform? And then, people are really religious about the tools they use. And they almost, some people may even quit their job because they can't use the tools that they're accustomed to or they want to use. So, how do you kind of, get people onto something, but also try and be conscientious about, what tools can we actually use because of security, because of the way that we want to operate, because of, all these other
Yep.
things?
So, uh, I think, look, it's up to the organization how much they want to push. Like, there are organizations that say you don't want to use my tools, you can leave. That's okay. Like,
Yeah.
no harm, no foul. Like, this is a requirement. And I think being confident in that. But when I talk up to teams and when I'm on teams trying to say our internal platform is a product and it is optional for use, and like, but you better use it. It's like usually the undertone. The only way, in my opinion, you can actually make something optional for use is if you make clear what requirements need to be met if you go off platform. So until you have some sort of a checklist, and ideally in an automated one that can verify, running in production, that things are doing what they're supposed to be doing, you it's really hard to truly have an optional platform, because the thorny road off the platform is so, like, it has booby traps. It's not just thorny, it has like traps that you don't know you're going to run into because you don't know what's required of you. So that's what I really try and push for, is start with what are the expectations of success, then build your platform so those expectations don't even have to be thought about. And if someone wants to go elsewhere, make your expectations, runnable by them to make sure that they're still meeting it. And if they want to go do that in a different cloud, a different whatever, like, either change your expectations or, you know, talk to them about the cost value of what they're choosing to do, or, be happy for them that they figured out a way to get what they need. So, yeah.
That all sounds way too logical, by the way. That sounds
Which
like,
is why it never gets done that way, right?
you know? So in this whole ecosystem, where does Craddocks fall? And then maybe explain what it does. It's open source, by the way, so everybody can use this. But what does it do, and kind of describe it?
Yeah. So Craddocks is a toolbox. Craddocks is not a platform as a service. You don't get to just like plug it in and walk away. But what it does is it allows you to build your platform as a service for your organization with all of the building blocks that you require. So it allows you to create internal APIs that can be called, that can be versioned, that can be upgraded. It also allows you to build in the business rules of your organization that you need to build in. So whether that be manual approvals or automated checks or anything else. And the big reason why it's so valuable is because what it's creating is an abstraction layer, is an API between what people need to ask for and how that gets done. And the real power behind an API, in my opinion, is it decouples the work. The most common solution these days in platform engineering is to give out code as an interface. Terraform modules, Helm charts, others. Now, all of a sudden, if you want to change your implementation, you're asking the users of that platform to change their what they have to learn. So if you want to change from Terraform to Pulumi, or you want to change to Crossplane and go CNCF, or you want to whatever, now you're asking your users to change how they what they've had to learn, how they interface with that thing. That's not an API. And so by creating an API that allows for just the inputs and outputs to be agreed, you're really unleashing both teams for creation, and it even more so for day two, because now all of a sudden the things that the inputs and outputs don't affect on either side can be updated by a single side. So all of a sudden you have something that an end user is asking for, and they haven't really declared a version. My common example is databases. No one cares what patch version database you're on. They do care what major version you're on, right? Because that changes the logic. So your users can say, I want a Postgres version X, but they won't tell you the minor and patch, so that you as an ops team have the ability to do those upgrades as you need to for security reasons. And it's just an easier kind of ownership model, just like we have with the cloud resources that we do. So yeah, it's a toolbox for building your internal APIs to provide anything as a service, and I think those are some of the values you get from it.
So how do you interact with it? Do you like what is the, on a day-to-day basis, you're creating a service. What is the first thing that you have to do?
Yeah, so if you are an ops engineer trying to provide something as a service internally, so providing test environments on demand or something, you would be creating a custom resource type in Kubernetes called a
Mhm.
promise. That's our custom resource type, and in there you can define all those things I talked about. You know, how things get deployed, where they get deployed, what the business rules are, and what that API looks like. Once that gets installed into Craddocks, it becomes on demand available, and that can get populated in any interface your organization uses. So it could become a Jira template, it could become a Backstage template, it could become, whatever it is that you want to use. And now your users are coming along, they fill in what they need to, and they press go. And their experience is that form request, whether that be through a Kubernetes request directly or through an interface like I mentioned, and they just get back the data they need where they need it. You can send them back, the URL for that test environment in a Slack message. You can send it back in a comment on Jira. This is all the stuff that you get to define, because that's what's unique to your business. Where do you like to get this information? Where your user is located. So
That's pretty neat. I mean, I actually understand more about it in the last 5 minutes than I did, just looking at,
that's
online
helpful.
and
No, it is the beauty and the curse of Craddocks is that it's a toolbox. So it's like trying to explain Rails to somebody from
Mhm.
that like writes code, right? Or from Ruby, or try to explain Spring Boot to someone. Like, the value proposition is that the heavy lifting of wiring is out of the way. Well, that's a really broad thing to say. So then you have to start saying, like, well, what do you mean by heavy lifting? Then you start talking about things like DAOs and like database accesses and all these things, and all of a sudden you're going really low. And
Yep.
that's basically what we end up with in a little bit of a trap when we talk about Craddocks, because we are essentially taking the methodology behind something like a Rails or a Spring Boot or whatever that helps you uh, speak a higher language to your programming language when you're creating services, and we're doing that for a platform service. But like, that takes
Yeah.
that takes some time.
Yeah,
So
it's always interesting because I've been on the boards of some companies, and they were very technical solutions. And the more technical they are, they may be great solutions, but they're also so extremely hard to explain.
yes,
And for businesses that really don't understand it, it's really, it's like, okay, well, what is the solve? It's time to get your app up, time to,
yep,
that's what
yep.
they're really trying to understand, is like, and for the development teams or the DevOps teams, they're like, oh, well, this makes sense. They're the people that I can understand it, because they're like, well, I could define a service and it takes me X amount less to define this service now because I can get it out there.
And the people that are actually so we're getting a lot of that kind of person that loves the idea of packaging up not just their Helm chart, but also the business rules around their Helm chart as a single package. So they're basically seeing that value of growing, a packaging system. But actually, the people who are really taking this and running with it are the higher level people who are essentially doing the Bezos mandate of like, what I want is everyone internally to be able to access things in a consistent way. And I
Yeah.
want it to be intersourceable. So I want people to be able to add to it, but do so in a way that is traceable of like, these are the things that are really sanctioned and these are the things that are sort of experimental. And all that packaging mechanism that Kubernetes provides to us out of the box, Craddocks provides to you. So you can create promises of certain packages that are only available internally to a certain group or are labeled as experimental, and you can bump them up as they get more mature into packages that are more widely visible and usable. So yeah, so I think the people who are really running with Craddocks at this stage are those people who can see the value of that. We call it multiplayer mode. Everyone in the organization being able to build their offerings into a consistent interface so that they can all. It's a new marketplace, right? It's an internal marketplace for them.
Yeah, I love that, and I also always have loved the idea of Kubernetes as a control plane because that's really when you come down to it. At the end of the day, Kubernetes is two things to me. Really, when you break it down, it's a control plane and an API server. That's really what it comes down to.
Yep.
What you want to do is totally, you can create whatever you want through CRDs, through whatever else you want. And I love that if you make that the center of your universe, then it can do everything. It can create your network policies, it can create your server policies, it can create your,
And they can do
I love the idea of doing all that stuff.
off Kubernetes stuff.
Yeah.
Crossplane's obviously also doing
Yeah, of
control planes on
course.
Kubernetes. There's tons of projects doing this, and
Yep.
basically what the idea is the people who are writing the code need to know Kubernetes, but people using those tools shouldn't have to. And I think that's the big thing that I think it doesn't always become obvious to people. Like nothing stops you from using off cluster things with Crossplane. You can talk to the cloud providers. I mean, that's one of their biggest,
Yeah.
key points. Nothing stops you from doing Kubernetes native things, non-Kubernetes native things with Craddocks. We have people running us and managing, edge nodes, like things that are just edge networking devices. We have mainframes, all these things. We have manual processes that can take days to complete that are all being sort of orchestrated by this platform that is being written because Kubernetes can crash, come back up and go, oh, right, that manual thing's still not done yet. Yep, I'm going to hang out a bit longer,
Yep.
right? There's nothing stopping us from having even these older business processes built into these more modern API relationships with our users. And that's what's allowing enterprises to adopt things like Craddocks, right? Is that they can have that flexibility, use that API server, use that control plane, as you say. So,
It's
yeah.
funny. I go back to like when I was a server admin many, many years ago, and I'm thinking about like this one app that was written from this guy out of his garage that was written for Windows 3.1. And by the way, it was 2000, the year 2000. We were just converting to Windows 2000
Okay.
and worried about the 2000 time thing and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And this one guy created this app, and I remember every couple weeks we'd have to reboot the app. And then what this app does is took a fax in and created like some kind of customer safety. It was a chemical company, so it was like a
Yep.
customer safety. And what if they had something like Kubernetes back then that could just automatically restart,
Yep.
something like that,
Yep.
that we knew wouldn't work well, but at least it got restarted every once in a while.
And that's like, but this is the thing is that we
Yeah.
have tools out there. So I worked at an organization that had a lot of hardware not long ago, and we used Rundeck to basically have
Yep.
that
I used to
same
love Rundeck.
experience
Yeah.
on non Kubernetes resources. Because you
Yep.
know what, trying to containerize some of the things that we had
Yeah.
running, if it was even possible, it was absolutely not business intelligent to spend the time on it. And I think
Yeah.
that's the one thing I get frustrated by when looking at Kubernetes as an API server and control plane is like this perception that you have to rewrite everything into
Yeah.
Kubernetes. And I don't think that should be the case. And I think
Yep.
um, that's where I'm excited to see this idea that Kubernetes becomes Linux. It becomes the thing that some people think about and nearly nobody does. Uh, and we're going to get there. It's going to be
Yeah.
that Kubernetes is the operating system and the stuff on top of it has such good abstractions built that you're able to build in a different way. But we're not there yet. There's, like we're still building those levels up away
Yeah.
from away from
But
Kubernetes.
we're in a lot more stable place than it's been. I mean, we just had the 10-year anniversary, right? Everybody was
Yeah, it's exciting.
excited about that. It's in a much more stable place. It's not the new sexy thing anymore. People, it's just kind of it's the thing now that just
Yep.
people run things on.
Yep. Exactly. And that's what's allowing those abstractions to come out. That's what's allowing Crossplane, Craddocks, Dapper, like all these things that are coming out and building on top of it. And that is, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Just
But I
yes.
remember running things on Rundeck, and Stackstorm was the other
Yep.
one that was, to automate stuff. Again, I was an orchestrator, so I love to find these orchestration tools that just create great interactions and allow me to do stuff. I mean, we were
Yep.
talking pre this is, pre-call that, I had Shannon Williams and Darren Shepard on last episode, and they're doing some really cool stuff around like that other layer. I think one of the problems has always been this like exclusivity of people's knowledge around like cloud native. And what this does is more democratize what you need to know. I mean, I'm not saying go out there and don't know anything, because that could be really, really dangerous.
Yep.
But if you do know enough that you just, want to create an AI interaction with something, that's something that I think brings more people to the game now.
Yep.
And I'm all
Yeah.
for that.
Absolutely. I think that's the duty of the people who understand those lower level abstractions, is to build a higher level that is safe and enabling, right? And there's a ton of startups out there right now that are doing that, that are creating like, quick to app things like wireframe to application transformations, and you're seeing the things with like the infrastructure from code. So you're also seeing
Yep.
it where like people can write web apps and have it result in the infrastructure they need to run it. All those things are going to start to move our value line up, and I think those are all really great. I think, but regardless, there's still going to be uniquenesses to your business. You're still going to have to make sure you're using those in a way that are compliant for your business and all those things. So I think people often will start to hang on to their toys when they think that, the jobs are at risk and things. But if you're doing things that are business relevant and will genuinely help your business compete in the market, you're safe. Where jobs and investments get into trouble is when you're basically recreating cloud providers or recreating third party tools. That's where you start to see, hang on, but if I could just pay for that once, I don't have, healthcare costs and uncertainties and management costs and all these things. So, um, yeah, so I think that's the challenge right now, is making sure you're focused on what is truly competitive for your business versus kind of more
Yeah.
broad.
Yeah, and going back to Craddocks, and I didn't ask this question, but I'm always interested, is what was the origin story? Like, what did you bang your head against the wall so many times as a company or pre-company that you said, "Hey, I really can make a better solution."
Why I got really excited is the thing I banged my head against the wall on as a platform engineer was trying to build an abstraction on top of Kubernetes that wasn't just Kubernetes again, but my own. And I wanted to be able to build something that was wider than Kubernetes, was truly like kind of organization wide and all that, that would allow me to not just recreate the wheel. That was something I was really interested in, and when I saw what they were doing at Syntasso, I was one of the first, founding engineers hired. I was super excited. So the reason that the founders were where they were is because they came up through operations themselves. The CEO was running some of the largest installations of Cloud Foundry, and then ended up in a consultancy that got acquired by Pivotal. So all three founders had a really rich history at Pivotal into VMware, and they saw how powerful that CF push experience is. But they also saw that despite how successful Cloud Foundry is as a easy to use tool, 100% of customers wanted to change 10% of the product, but it was always a different 10%. And so, like, it was impossible to say, "Oh, okay, great. You want to change that 10%? Sure, I hear you. I will change that for you," because then someone else would want to change it back or change it to something different.
Hmm.
And they basically found that, like, their original history had been build your own stuff. And when they found Cloud Foundry, they were like, "Yes, finally I can buy something." They got full in on Cloud Foundry and they were then having the challenge of, okay, but it doesn't actually fit everyone's use case. So now what we're trying to do is provide a different pendulum swing. So don't build it yourself. Don't, I mean, if you can buy it off the shelf for your org, please do. But when you get to the point where you can't, don't go straight back to build it yourself. Come to this sort of middle ground where you have the building blocks built for you, so you can spend your time and energy on the things that matter. So
I love
that's a bit
that.
of our
Yeah,
origin
no,
story.
I think that's amazing. I mean, because to me, the best products are built when there's some kind of, thing that you just get so frustrated with that you think that you could build something better, and usually that is the truth.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's we like to say that we won't make the same mistakes. That doesn't mean we won't make mistakes, right? So we're
Yep.
trying to learn with users as we go. And what I can tell you we won't make the mistake of is being overly prescriptive. And what I will tell you we won't make the mistake of is using only primitives, handing only primitives off to our users. Now, what other fun journey we'll go on is something that we're going to find as we work with people, and that's why it's exciting to have our customers really putting it to the test, and building their systems up and finding what they need access to. Every time they say, oh well, I could do it this way, and it just feels a bit rough, that's what we see as like, that's us. No, 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 give us that complexity, give us the ability to make that easier for you to implement. Now, how you implement it, again, back to you, because we don't want to be prescriptive about that. But
Yeah, no, that's absolutely amazing. And you said one thing that's always interesting is that you're listening to your customers. And that to me is number one, because there are a lot of companies that think that they know, better or what the solution is, but it's a hard mix kind of saying, okay, well, yes, we are listening to our customers and we also have to figure out like what do most customers want? What does the industry want, And the best products are built that way.
yeah. I think, as an engineer, it can be frustrating sometimes that we don't just run forward with our first ideas, but
Yep.
we have a really strong culture of, making sure that if we're going to be building something, that we have people who are giving us feedback on what it is that we're building, that they're using it, that we're getting that in, because building these foundations that we're building and getting that right is going to give us such an uplift over time. And yeah, so customers always are a huge part of our design process.
And you do something with the CNCF too, right? So what is it that you're doing with them?
Yeah, I'm a working group lead. So working groups are a subsidiary of technical advisory groups who are advisors to the TALK, or the Technical Oversight Committee, which goes up to the CTO. And so it's kind of a way of making sure that even deep concepts are getting sort of fed up and down the chain. So from the CTO down and up from the ground. And our working group has focused on inside of app delivery, that platform space, and we've released a white paper about what platforms are, a maturity model which helps organizations understand what they need. So this is not a race to level 4. This is a, what do you need, and are you doing what you need to get there. And we're currently working on another level of making that concrete by helping people actually score themselves against the maturity model, and find where they are, while also trying to dive into some of the details about that we encourage on the model. So in particular, platform as a product is a concept that a group within our working group is doing some research around. There's an amazing set of interviews going on to try and gather some information about how people do platform product design in the wild, in the real world, right now. So get involved in interviewing, getting interviewed. Just join the group if you have any interest in this stuff.
By the way, that maturity paper was presented at the last KubeCon, and it was really, really interesting. And I really enjoyed like just going through it. So if you haven't seen that yet, I'll post links to it in the show notes. But it's really, really introspective. Like figure out what you need. Figure out, and this goes back to what I always talk about is figure out what your needs are first. This is such a
Mhm.
crazy idea, I know, but figure out what your needs are first and then figure out how to proceed.
Yes, and that's I really appreciated getting to know Sevi Kim from Spotify backstage team recently, and he is so good at saying like, let's design from the interactions backwards, and
Yep.
I love it because every time you design from the implementation forwards, you're spending so much energy just getting it
Hmm.
working. You run out of steam before it becomes a great interaction,
Yep.
and if you can go the other way around, you can really fundamentally change people's experiences. So same thing goes for your investment in platform engineering as an organization, or any other decision you're making. Start with the outcomes, and then worry about implementation off the back.
Yeah, and if you start the other way, then typically it's going to change about 5,000 times before you even get to the
You
to the other
forget what your
side.
outcomes even were, right?
You
Like, because you're just like
absolutely forget.
meandering your way
Yep,
through,
absolutely. And
technical challenges.
the more people you bring in, the more trouble it's going to be.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. Yeah. We've been around the block, haven't we? That's what that sounds
Yes.
like.
Yep. Yep.
Uh,
So, uh, part of this show, I do this section that's called Buzzworthy or Buzzworthless. where I'll give you a couple terms
Okay.
and you tell me whether they're currently still buzzworthy or they're buzzworthless, and maybe a couple sentences on why you think that.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say, and it's usually related to stuff that you're accustomed to. So obviously, let's talk DevOps. Is DevOps still buzzworthy, or is it buzzworthless at this point?
I think it's I will say it's buzz worthless, but it's not worthless.
Yes.
I think it should be something that is built into the culture. That idea of having accountability and ownership of what you're delivering, and wanting to do so with compassion and collaboration with your users and with fast feedback loops and all those things. Yeah, come on. Like it's not buzzworthy anymore, but please, 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 it is still worthwhile.
Yes,
so
I totally
so
agree. And platform engineering, is that buzzworthy or buzzworthless?
so it is a buzzword. That's for sure. And the reason I say that is because I don't think there is consistency on description. It is going the way of DevOps and anything else where people have their own reads, and there's a lot
Yep.
of marketing that creates challenges there. So, but is it buzzworthy or buzz worthless? I think it's still buzzworthy
Yeah.
because I think that it has not yet um, truly separated from. Yeah, but I have a DevOps team. See, I'm doing platform engineering. Like this idea of building thinnest viable platforms, floating platforms,
Is that even a term?
reduce.
I'm going to use that term. Thinnest
So
viable platform.
so that's from team topologies. Thinnest viable
Really?
platform is from team topologies, and it will
Okay.
often get confused with minimum viable.
Yeah.
Minimum
I know
viable
minimum
being
viable. Yeah.
how you get started. So minimum viable is like do the least you can do until you need more and then keep adding to it. But when you do that, you just keep adding to it.
Yep.
Thinnest viable is about making sure to continue to cull what you don't need anymore, continuing to offload to third
I like
parties
that.
where what you can, when you can. And Gregor Hope talks about it as the floating platform. So detaching your anchors from lower level technologies that you may have had to bespoke build uh, when commodity technologies become available and you can transition to them. Um, so that's the stuff that I think why I'll be honest, it's probably optimistic to call it still buzzworthy. I'll be honest, but I think that there's still a lot of areas for the industry to benefit from. So I'd really like for it to still have a bit of learning curve there.
I think we need, but going back to your comment there, I think we need like a lexicon of terms
Oh,
for so that everybody can agree on what these things are. Like DevOps was the worst. DevOps
yeah.
was you ask any company, and it's going to be so much different than one another.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
I was just on a panel today about DevOps and earlier today, and it was some people were talking about CI/CD pipelines as DevOps, like almost as a one for one, and some people were talking about the DevOps team or the DevOps person, and
Yep.
some people were that. So even within a panel of people that I really highly respect and think are fantastic, like you're going to get those differences. So I have to admit I just don't believe we're going to get to a consistent answer. What my hope is that we get to the point where people are getting value from it. And I
Yeah.
think that right now, there's a risk that people are looking at platform engineering, they're not getting value because all they're doing is just rewriting the same code in different technologies. And I want to make sure we're thinking about that business context, starting from the outcomes, like you're saying, and all that. So that's why I do the working group stuff. Hopefully, we can move the needle on that. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we only have a few minutes left. Anything that you want to leave people with that you want people to think about or
We talk about what's the definition of platform engineering, and maybe I won't claim this as being the definition per se, but a concept I'd really like to continue to share is the idea of platforms are what is unique to your business but common across teams within your business. Really, and when you think of it in that way, it's really easy to think about the fact that a thinnest viable or a floating platform requires you to perpetually be moving things that you were custom building but aren't actually custom to your business any longer out. It kind of keeps that evolutionary aspect in mind. And so yeah, I think that if we're thinking like that and we're thinking about the business value, then we're doing good things no matter what you're doing, building your own, buying, whatever it is. So all good.
I love that, and that's something that I, if people are listening to the show, I talk about that all the time. Is thinking about the needs first
Yep.
and going forward. So I absolutely love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great chat.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.